First leg of the Champions League semi-final tomorrow in London as Spurs take on Ajax. Of course, Tottenham Hotspur go into this match with somewhat of a depleted squad. Kane out, Winks out, Aurier out, Lamela out. Meanwhile, Sissoko and Vertonghen are both questionable. Son as well suspended for this first leg. So this is how we expect Spurs, well, Gab expects Spurs to set up. You look at that, boys, and it's still a good side. And it should be a side that should be able to get a result against Ajax at home.
Well, I'd be hoping Sissoko's back in there, and I think if he is fit, he would probably play. So a couple of the players that are injured were probably bench players, particularly Lamela and Aurier. Obviously, Kane's not. The absence of Son is massive for them because of the pace with him and Lucas Moura in behind. But the answer to your question is it's still a very good side. However, we've talked about this. This is such a difficult tie to call because Ajax are a fantastically talented mixture of youth, experience, playmakers, and they've proven that. And they've proven it on the road. More importantly, they've proven it in Madrid, and they proved it in Turin. I fancy Spurs being at home to get a result. But I don't necessarily fancy them to go through over the two legs. It's a difficult one.
I understand the love for Ajax, but thrown into that as well, they beat a Real Madrid side who are just terrible at the moment. Yeah, they won away, and I know they won at the Bernabeu.
Yeah, but they completely took them to...
And Juventus just had a nightmare. Tactically, they just didn't really know what to do. So this time they're going into a match where you're going to be up against a team that's tactically sound, where you're not necessarily the underdogs anymore, so you're not playing with house money. So have things not just changed slightly for Ajax going into this tie compared to both the ones
you're talking about
Turin and Madrid?
About Tottenham being tactically sound when Max Allegri, pulled one over in Pochettino the season before, tactically. So, I mean, I think that's a lot. I think to say, Juventus didn't have their best night. However, to say that it was only they were tactically naive, Ajax exploited them. That's what I would say, and they can exploit this Tottenham side. It's a 50-50 call in my opinion. I mean, it really is. If Tottenham cannot shut down the Ajax playmakers, Tadic, Ziyech, De Boek, people like that, Frenkie de Jong, if they can't stop them, if they've got space to operate, then they're going to have big problems.
I think that's the thing. I mean, as much as it's easy to say, well, Real really aren't that good and Juventus had a bad night, I think that's not giving Ajax the credit that they are due. Let's remember the first leg against Real Madrid and also in Amsterdam against Juventus and how Ajax responded. And I think maybe that plays into Spurs' hands as much as anything, the fact that the second leg is in Amsterdam this time around, where Ajax, a lot more will be expected of them. So maybe tactically and in terms of their own approach, it's new for Ajax. But Spurs still favourites, but not for the first time we're seeing Ajax come into this as underdogs.
Gab?
Well, first of all, I agree. If Sissoko's fit, Sissoko plays. I don't think there's any question there. But obviously, he's still a doubt. I think one of the keys, and this is why the midfield is so important, is if Sissoko's not there, you're looking at Dyer, who's still sort of half fit after his injury. You look at Wanyama, still Wanyama. You're basically forcing Dele Alli and Christian Eriksen to go and do a ton of defensive work to basically deny the midfield. They don't want to fall into the same trap that Juve fell into, where Ajax were just passing rings around them. But if Dele Alli and Christian Eriksen, who are already tired after a long season, especially Eriksen, if they have to go and do the grunt work in midfield, then who's going to go and help out Lucas Moura on his own at the other end of the pitch? Pochettino spoke about this today. He insists that his team aren't tired. He says that, no, if we were tired, we wouldn't have run 2.5 miles more than West Ham did at the weekend. I don't know. I think if you looked pretty closely, you kind of saw his nose getting longer when he said that. I think Spurs are worn down, and I think this is really going to be a battle of nerves and midfields.
It's interesting you mentioned worn down. Let's not forget Ajax have had the week off to prepare for this away from the Eredivisie. And it's interesting the Premier League that's never shy in blowing its own trumpet when it comes to being the best league in the world. But sometimes that falls on somewhat deaf ears when you take a look at their run in Europe. is there not an argument to say that they could or should help out their teams more in preparations for these big European nights as other leagues do?
TV companies.
But everyone's got TV companies,
Yeah,
haven't they? Everyone's got TV contracts with different leagues.
The Premier League are concerned with themselves and themselves only. They don't care about what the individual clubs do in Europe. They don't care about the English national team. You can make the argument that, for instance, we use the Eredivisie here. The perception of that league is almost tied to how well Dutch clubs do in the Champions League. English football and the Premier League don't have that issue, and the Premier League recognises that it doesn't matter if all 4 English teams crash out in the group stage, they will still be able to command a lot of money. It does not to the Premier League as a business. It does not.
Quickly, Gab.
Dan, there's 20 teams, 20 clubs in the Premier League. They all have an equal vote. There's only 6 of them that ever actually do anything meaningful in Europe. Those are the only ones who would care about it. The other 14 want to maximize the TV revenue so they can get their share. That's why the Premier League, when it comes to fixtures, they're going to always put the TV audiences first.
Last word, Craig, on this quickly.
A mixture of the Premier League and the TV companies, and you know, ultimately. And the crazy thing is, just briefly, is that Liverpool playing on a Wednesday in 2 days, played on the Friday night.
Yeah.
And Tottenham playing on the Tuesday, played on the Saturday morning. Now, it's small margins, but small margins at this level can make a big difference.